Starting a conversation with someone from another culture can be tricky. Some questions may seem like a harmless way to break the ice, but to a French person, they can come across as awkward or even rude. And don't get me wrong, it's not about French people being too sensitive. It's more about you avoiding the most popular and strange clichés. C'est parti! Why do French people protest all the time? Or as you could say in French, pourquoi est-ce que les Français sont toujours en grève? Why are French people on strike all the time? Let's start by talking about this one. This is an awkward question because yes, you might experience strikes when visiting Paris, especially for transportation, maybe with the national train company, la SNCF. This question dives straight into current politics and stereotypes, which is always risky or simply tiresome. The French person you're talking to might actually work for la SNCF and be tired of hearing the same jokes. Or maybe they've just spent 3 hours trying to get to work because of a strike. Many French people feel pride for being a country that's ready to go on strikes and fight for more social benefits like les congés payés, paid holidays, and stronger workers' rights. And it's a real reason this question could be awkward. It sounds dismissive of something that is part of our national identity. La grève, strikes, and les manifestations, protests, are in line with the current of French history, from the French Revolution to the minor strikes from the Industrial Revolution to the famous Mai 68 protests and its famous slogan like Sous les pavés la plage, under the pavement, the beach, sous les pavés la plage. And more recently, the waves from les gilets jaunes, the yellow vest movement from 2019. All these protests cover different issues, of course, but they feed the same stereotype of the French people as rebellious. True or not, it's also part of how we see ourselves. Something else you could ask instead. Qu'est-ce qui pousse les Français à manifester? Repeat after me. Qu'est-ce qui pousse les Français à manifester? What motivates French people to protest? Qu'est-ce qui pousse les Français à manifester? Our next question is obviously rude itself. Why are French people so rude? Or in French, pourquoi les Français sont-ils si désagréables? By the way, the word rude exists in French, but it's a false friend. It means harsh or tough, like un hiver rude, a harsh winter, un hiver rude. This question puts us in an awkward spot because it forces the French person to defend an entire nation. It's like walking up to someone and asking, why do people think your family is so cold? Not the best conversation starter, right? On the other hand, is it true? First of all, when visiting France, keep in mind that you are stepping out of your comfort zone and your usual social filters. Back home, you've probably built, consciously or not, a community of friends and places where you feel welcome and you have learned to navigate around the grumpy people of your daily life. When traveling, you might interact with a more random set of people, and these filters can disappear, so you will meet more rude French people. But deep down, we know that's not what you mean here when you're asking this question. You're experiencing a real cultural difference. We don't have the same definition of la politesse, politeness, la politesse, and the same expectations of friendliness. Take our customer service, for example. Yes, a French waiter might say non to your request to change every ingredient in a dish. This non is not merely rudeness. It's that customer service is supposed to know better than you what would make this moment special or how the dish should be served. It can be frustrating, but ideally it will give you a better experience than if they just said yes to everything you ask. But sometimes, or often maybe, they're simply actually being rude. That also happens, and I'm very sorry about that. Another part of French culture is that silence can be a sign of respect. For example, when you share a space with someone you don't know. We might stay quiet not because we're ignoring you, but because we believe conversation is sacred. We don't do small talk the same way other cultures do. There is also something that cultural experts call the peach versus coconut personalities. Americans, for instance, tend to be like peaches, soft and friendly on the outside, but with a harder bit of privacy they keep protected. French people, like many Europeans as well, are more like coconuts. We might seem harder to crack at first, but once you break through the shell, you find genuine warmth and friendship that lasts. It's not that we're rude, we're just build trust and friendship differently. Interestingly, this perception isn't unique to French people. Many Europeans get labeled as rude by visitors. It's really about different cultural approaches to politeness. Sometimes we even wish our customer service was more like in America. But then again, would it be really French? Something else you could ask instead. Quelles sont les règles de politesse les plus importantes en France? What are the most important rules of politeness in France? Repeat after me. Quelles sont les règles de politesse les plus importantes en France? Good. Quelles sont les règles de politesse les plus importantes en France? By the way, over 32,000 people join my newsletter. You can get weekly insights, tips and exercises on real spoken French, specially crafted to make learning fun and practical. And yes, it's free. Our third awkward question is, do you hate Americans? Or in French, est-ce que vous détestez les Américains? Est-ce que vous détestez les Américains? I know you won't ask this question, but who knows? Maybe your friend might? So let me say a few words about this whole topic. France and the US do have a complex relationship with a back and forth throughout the years. We don't see America as we did in the 80s or even in the early 2000s. Of course, you will find French people who will complain about American politics, whether it's about Trumpism or progressives or military operation or anything else. The more common complaining is about the soft power of globalization. There used to be a big anti-McDonald's movement, for instance, a clash between traditional French cuisine and la malbouffe, junk food or processed food. Other people think that the English language is overtaking French language from movies to marketing. On the flip side, this whole issue is that French people love American culture too much. We're watching the same TV shows, the same blockbusters, we're following many similar trends from social media, and even adopting the same slang. So it's a complex relationship, but you might know all of this already. There's a more interesting part. French people can be surprisingly very pro-American. For instance, did you know that line dancing and country music are very popular in France? You can find these clubs all over the French countryside and small towns. There is a whole hidden part of French culture that's very much in love with Americana. The most famous example for this was Johnny Hallyday, of course. This Belgian singer, born Jean-Philippe Schmet, took the name of his American stepfather and started embodying the American dream through his fashion, energy and rock and roll spirit. He became an icon of French music for 60 years. For many French people, making it in the US is still seen as the ultimate dream. This might explain why Américain can be very positive in everyday French. For instance, a French person can proudly show you une cuisine américaine. Une cuisine américaine is their fancy open-plan kitchen. Or you might hear the phrase la classe américaine, American slick style, la classe américaine. And of course, on the flip side, many Americans love the idea of a French culture, but without the actual French people. We both have this fascination with a somewhat idealized version of each other's culture. Something else you could ask instead. Comment est-ce que la France est influencée par la culture américaine selon vous? How is France influenced by American culture according to you? Repeat after me. Comment est-ce que la France est influencée par la culture américaine selon vous? That's a bit tough, right? Comment est-ce que la France est influencée par la culture américaine selon vous? This one is a more tongue-in-cheek. Do you know my friend Martin? He lives in Nantes. Tu connais mon pote Martin? Il habite à Nantes. If you ask it, it's probably a joke. There are 67 million people in France, so you know that we can't all know each other, right? But on the other hand, if I actually know Martin from Nantes, it would be incredible. So go for it and ask. The awkward thing here is to think that France is a smaller country than it actually is. For instance, sorry if I shock you, but we don't all live in Paris. There are lots of places in France. Some places are in la campagne, the countryside, la campagne. Some places are in la banlieue, the suburbs around the city. And I kid you not, but there are also other cities than Paris, like Lyon, Marseille, Lille for the biggest ones, but also Toulouse, Bordeaux, Strasbourg, Nantes. Don't simply call them all la province, the Parisian word to say everywhere in France outside of Paris. Most people live outside Paris like I do, and we find it condescending. France is too diverse in its geography and local cultures to put it all in the same basket. Oh, and by the way, la province is not la Provence, that area in the southern France with the sunshine and the lavender. Can you hear the difference? It's in the nasal sound. Province, Provence. Province, Provence. Something else you could ask instead. Tu vis où en France? C'est comment chez toi? Where do you live in France? How is it where you live? Repeat after me. Tu vis où en France? C'est comment chez toi? Tu vis où en France? C'est comment chez toi? Now let's start talking about food. Our fourth awkward question is about French cuisine, or rather about these two very specific French dishes. Do you really eat snails and frog legs? Vous mangez vraiment des escargots et des cuisses de grenouille? Ha! Look, this one is a legitimate question. Because we know that it's weird. We totally get why these dishes fascinate foreigners. But here is the thing. Even French people are divided about them. I will be honest, I don't eat frog legs because burk. That's French for yikes. Burk. I don't like eating these. And my partner doesn't eat snails or any shellfish because they're disgusting. And you know what? That's totally normal. Frog legs in particular are very unusual. You'll have to really look for them if you want to taste. Personally, I only had the chance to taste them once at a special reception for the national holiday on the 14th of July. And I'm not looking to taste them again. But let's talk about les escargots for a second. This dish is more common, but we still wouldn't eat them every day or even every year. Yes, they're chewy and weird. Yes, the garlic butter and special cooking makes them delicious. Yes, you're allowed to find the idea of them absolutely disgusting. I understand. I wouldn't eat a slug, for example, even though they're basically cousins. See what I mean? It's all about what we are used to. So yes, some French people love snails and frog legs, others don't. C'est la vie. And speaking of traditional French dishes, there's actually a growing conversation about foie gras. More and more French people are choosing not to eat it because of animal welfare concerns. It's not taboo anymore to say non merci when it's offered at a fancy dinner. This brings me to a bigger change in French society. Being vegetarian is becoming more and more mainstream, as well as being vegan. Yes, we say vegan. We used to say végétalien, but that word fell out of fashion for the American version. Anyway, you will find vegan options in most restaurants now, especially in bigger cities. We are not just about traditional meat-based dishes anymore. though this tradition is very much alive. Something else you could ask instead. Quel est votre plat préféré dans la cuisine française? What's your favorite dish in French cuisine? Repeat after me. Quel est votre plat préféré dans la cuisine française? Quel est votre plat préféré dans la cuisine française? Another food-centered question could be, how do you stay slim with all those croissants with butter? Comment tu fais pour rester mince avec tous ces croissants au beurre? First of all, well, thank you. But second, don't insult the croissant, okay? The point of French food isn't rester mince, staying thin, rester mince or not. It's not about what some people call la grossophobie, fat shaming or fat phobia, la grossophobie. The point is to eat good food. It's hard to explain, but it's not even about experiencing the food itself like a foodie around the world looking for the best restaurants and taking pictures for Instagram. It's about celebrating the craft and the land and the tradition, which together create the French concept of le terroir, le terroir. The quality of French food and products is very protected with les labels such as AOP, appellation d'origine protégée, appellation d'origine protégée, and AOC, appellation d'origine contrôlée. This means, for instance, that a camembert cheese should be done around the town of Camembert in Normandy with the traditional processes. We fear that otherwise business will find a way to make a cheaper, blander camembert and we will lose the original one in a race to the bottom. Yes, we take food very seriously. And another part of it is that to celebrate this cuisine correctly, it has to be a social event as well. French people don't like to eat alone, as in individually when you're a family or a group. You eat together. It feels disrespectful to the dish that each person eats on its own. We have to share it together. It doesn't have to be fancy, by the way. Everybody can cook a very simple meal, and with the good products available, it's easy to make it good. And more importantly, food habits start early. And it starts from the very beginning, by the way. I recommend the famous book Bringing Up Bébé by, I'm going to say this in French, Pamela Druckerman, even though she's American. Among other things, she explains how French parents introduce their kids to a wide variety of tastes early on through what we call la diversification alimentaire. La diversification alimentaire, a structured approach to introducing solid foods. I did this for my son and everybody else around me do it as well. In a French home, meals are a time to sit together, try new flavors and learn patience. That's how we try to pass along this relationship with food to our children. And that's the point of eating good croissants. Staying thin is just a nice paradox on top of it all. Something else you could ask instead. Quel est le plat que tu préfères cuisiner? What's the dish you most like to cook? Repeat after me. Quel est le plat que tu préfères cuisiner? Quel est le plat que tu préfères cuisiner? Finally, let's talk about French restaurants with Can I take it in a doggy bag? Vous pouvez me faire un doggy bag? Vous pouvez me faire un doggy bag? The staff might probably answer you, c'est quoi un doggy bag? Pour le chien? What's a doggy bag? Is it for dogs? But if you ask, je voudrais un sac pour emporter les restes. I would like a bag to take the leftovers home. That might work better. Well, traditionally, French restaurants would flat out tell you no. Rude, no. As I told you, a meal is a place and a time and a social settings, and you can't just take it somewhere else later. But also, more practically, portions are generally designed to be eaten in one sitting. Here, the cultural norm is to order what you can actually eat and avoid food waste. You might often hear finis ton assiette, finish your plate, finis ton assiette. Bringing home leftovers was only possible in some restaurants that already do takeaways. However, Times are changing. Many people now take leftover food home, especially when it comes to reducing food waste. As a parent of a 5-year-old, for instance, I often bring a small container when eating out. It's practical for packing up what my son won't eat because it's too much. I don't like throwing food, and it will make the perfect meal for the evening. It's especially handy since the child menu is supposed to feed the appetite of children from 3 to 12-year-olds with different stomach sizes. All this to say, try to finish your plate, but if you want to carry some leftovers home, there is no harm trying. This is what you can ask instead. Vous pouvez m'emballer ce qu'il reste pour pouvoir le ramener à la maison? Can you pack the leftovers so I can bring it home? Repeat after me. Vous pouvez m'emballer ce qu'il reste pour pouvoir le ramener à la maison? Vous pouvez m'emballer ce qu'il reste pour pouvoir le ramener à la maison? Remember, it's not about avoiding conversation. It's about starting it off on the right foot. What about you? Have you ever been asked something awkward about your own culture? Or is there a question you've been dying to ask about French people but never dared to? Let me know in the comments. And if you're ready to dive deeper into French culture and improve your spoken French, make sure to subscribe to my channel and join my newsletter for exclusive tips and lessons. Merci beaucoup for watching, bonne journée et à bientôt!